Greetings, good evening, everybody. Wanted to tune in real quick and give you an update on this just released. If you haven't seen it, probably many of you know that the city of Cincinnati received over $290 million, or will receive over $290 million as our portion of the American Rescue Plan Act, the stimulus that in total is going to be providing $350 billion in direct funding to state and local governments. Let me first kind of preface this by saying these dollars were desperately needed. In the big scheme of things, and even going back before COVID, our state and local governments, particularly local governments in a state like Ohio, have been absolutely crushed and decimated in terms of funding, not only coming from the federal government, but certainly here from the state level. Tax changes at the state level in Ohio, and also cuts to our local government fund that have gotten increasingly worse over the last 8 or 10 years since the beginnings of the Kasich administration, have left a hole anywhere from 15 to 20, and depending on the year, it could be much more than that, $25 million a year to the city of Cincinnati, and funding that has really not been replaced, funding that was promised to cities, not only Cincinnati, but cities across the state of Ohio when our state income tax was first enacted, I believe in 1931 or so, the early 30s. The give back was, we're going to enact the statewide earnings tax, this statewide income tax, but on the backside, we are going to provide to all of our local governments, cities, townships, villages, dollars that kind of flow through the state. So essentially what's happened over the last 10 years is the state basically said, everybody's forgotten about that. The people that were around in 1931 forgot about it. It's not written in stone anywhere. And so that kind of gentleman's agreement over the last 80 years has been violated to the great decimation. It's been very bad for cities, for local governments, ever since the 2010 timeframe. We have tightened our belts here. I'll get into this. It's more for a little bit of a discussion for another day about some of the direct impacts that that's had on us here in Cincinnati and other places around the state. But now, coming out of COVID, with everything has been 2020, everything has been around with COVID and the decimation of our local economy, obviously our hospitality industry. We've done certain things to help support them, and we've gotten some CARES Act money going back from the first round of that. But we are at a watershed moment right here. We are at a moment in time where we are being bestowed, and really cities across the country are being bestowed a chunk of money, the likes of which, A, we've never seen before, and B, we'll probably never see again in our lifetimes. Nearly $250 million. So at this critical and transformative moment in time, we have now currently in the city of Cincinnati a lame duck mayor. We have a city council that has numerous appointed members that were not elected in 2017. And beyond that, we have a situation where the administration and city manager underneath a lame duck mayor has come out with an entire spending plan for the entire $293 billion with a B dollars. So the article is up. I think most of our local media is covering this, but the article is up here in the Business Courier, and it gives a rundown of basically what all of the proposals are. Every dime is accounted for, at least in this plan as it starts, and we can talk about how this will work. But whose priorities? This is the administration, the city manager, who's closely aligned with this lame duck mayor, has come up with this, has asked nobody what priorities of the community, what priorities of the people is any of this meeting. Now, that's not to say that when you go down and look at this list, there's some things that I see on here I kind of like. I mean, that's good. But you pick and choose. You get all the way down to the end. The very last thing, it's $650,000 to extend recreation center hours in summer. I agree with that. I support that. The very last thing, the rounding error at the end. And some other things. The newspapers are leading with the headline. I saw the Enquirer is leading with the headline of Blink's coming back. Blink's amazing. I love Blink. It's fantastic. It draws tourism and dollars and all those kinds of things. That's great. Is that the number one thing out of this once in a lifetime opportunity? That's what we focus on. That's the headline photo for our friends in the media. So council member Opaque is quoted in this article as saying, nobody even asked our elected council, our directly elected council members, what they're, some of them, a number of them are appointed, but all of them are our council members now. Nobody asked them. Of course, they get to go and now take this document and move things around and kind of put their twist and spin on it. But I think it's pretty clear here what was going on is what we want to cast the die is what we want. So any of the changes that get made are kind of on the, on the edges. Now I'll say myself in our campaign, we were the first ones to release as soon as this money from DC, which is very vital to cities and localities across the country. As soon as it was released, the number one thing I'm talking about is funding Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Okay, we know that money that was supposed to be going to that originally from the Airbnb tax, the common name for it, the Airbnb tax, got redirected. So that was a year-long process of figuring out the Airbnb tax and getting everybody on the same page of that. And the concept was the money that comes out of it goes to funds affordable housing, with the concept being that, with some Airbnbs off the market, it can't be like long-term housing. So that's the give and the take. And it just got redirected. And we literally crossed the line. So I'm saying that's the number one, top priority. It's the issue. We're going to be voting on it. It's going to be on the ballot in May. No matter how you feel that, pro or against, it's the number one topic. So that's mentioned in here with $5 million for Affordable Housing Trust Fund on the third page. My point is this. At this moment in time, not only should the city council be considered or at least talked to before the plan is rolled out, what about the people? What about the community? Just so happens I'm reading an article today, as this was just recently announced. I'm reading an article talking about the historic $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan of 2021, with $350 billion in direct funding going to state and local governments. Absolutely need it. Here's how the structure and how the suggestion to cities how this should work. And some are already doing it. Some did it with their prior CARES Act money that they received. A process, not one done, in the back meeting room of City Hall, or who knows where. We don't know where this was drawn up, but in a very transparent way that engages and involves the community and the people. Not the least of which being our city council, our fellow citizens that we, have to represent us. So a couple of suggestions of what we could do that other places are doing. Always want to look at best practices. We don't need to necessarily invent the wheel here. What are other places doing? How's it working? How are they getting it right? And then how can we improve upon that? A couple of things that we want to do. We want to have a community engagement strategy. A community engagement strategy. How about that? Allocate the funding more equitably and with the biggest impact by better understanding expressed community needs and priorities. Well, how the hell do you know what that is if you don't even talk to the people? If you're not out in the streets, where are the town halls? We could have, east, north, west, south, central points in between. Let's have some town halls talk about this. What are our priorities? I know we have a number of plans on the shelf, some of which, like our infamous 2010 bike plan, has been collecting dust for a decade, just gets ignored. So maybe we should have like some new meetings and talk about, because this is a unique, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to engage the community. What do they want? We don't talk to the council, let alone the community councils, and damn near let alone a person that would just like to voice their opinion on the matter. Oh, point 2, get residents and council on board with medium and long-term growth funding strategies. Okay, so let's talk about how some of these spending items not only impact, our immediate current needs coming out of COVID, the needs for the people, the needs for housing, the needs for our small businesses, and we know about all the needs when it comes to transportation and the disaster, dangerous the racetracks of the roads that we build around here that get our kids run down left and right. I see some, just as an aside, I see some mention of road projects here, but it doesn't specifically mention things like Vision Zero and traffic calming and some of those things. Street rehabilitation projects, and it names a couple of the streets. They're naming the streets for us already. Are those the priorities? Who came up with these priorities? Because when I go around and hear the priorities where the people are getting run over, I'm not sure that aligns with what's put out here on this list. Is this a data-driven approach? We don't know. Data-driven or much less community input-driven. So it's a second suggestion here from Zen City is the name of this website. Very urbanist, involved in local government and local government strategy and so forth. Get residents and council on board with medium and long-term growth funding strategies. And yeah, some of this we can put to use for the longer terms, and how do we grow our tax base and help to create jobs and help businesses and these kinds of things. But again, we don't know what anybody thinks about this because they don't ask. And then third, better measure the impact of the spending decision. So what are the goals here? Are they measurable? Are they attainable? How do we know that when we spend, and actually the federal government and Congress has put time limits on this. So you can't just put it in the bank for 10 years. And there are limitations on what you can spend it on and what you can't. But by looking at this list here, I mean, it's pretty wide ranging. So I think we can cover a lot of territory. But $250 million, I feel like the folks should have some input on it. What is important in the neighborhoods? What are the priorities? How does that align with what's here? And then let's measure it as we start to spend these dollars. Is it being effective in what we want to achieve? I think these are common sense questions. So at this point, there's more. We'll get into the details of this. This was just released today. We know that other cities are doing it in a much more transparent, in a much more inclusive way, in a way that includes the people. But what I would call for, if I was on council at this moment, which I'm not, but if I were, I would be calling for town halls across the city of Cincinnati, perhaps maybe with our community councils, or maybe in addition to at least a few of them around the city, and ask folks right now at this moment, because even our dusty plans that's sitting on the shelf for 5 years, things may have changed. We may have different priorities or different needs because of everything that's happened with 2020, with COVID, and et cetera. And what are the priorities? And maybe that changes things. Maybe that changes people's thoughts on, a yes or a no vote on the Affordable Housing Charter Amendment in May, depending on how these dollars are allocated. There are huge impacts here. And so at any rate, I would say we need to have a much more inclusive process. We need to have one that is perhaps modeled on other places that have done this successfully. It needs not to be just what one or two people down at 801 Plum Street coined up on their own, drummed up on their own with their own ideas. We need to have some goals of what we're trying to achieve, the outcome of all of this money. 200, and we have argued over paper clips in this city, folks, in our budgets. We've argued over just rounding errors to the whole thing. This is the opportunity. $290+ million. We'll never see it again. Now is the time, and the people must be included in the process so that we know that we're meeting the needs of the community at the end of the day. So with that, I will leave you for now. I am going to continue hashtag working now, working hard, working now, and we'll hopefully get to the bottom of this. But to our friends on City Council, I urge you, not only should you be offended by the fact that you were not included in any of this, please consider taking the rest of us into consideration in approaching the city, approaching the neighborhoods, approaching the community and the people to hear about what they want to do with this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. With that, everybody have a great night, be safe, and I will talk to you soon.